Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about the I would call it an analytical agenda. A kind of mind-based, identity-driven compulsion to figure things out, or to conclude things, or to categorize something, an idea, as an idea that the self believes is reality, as either this or that, is either this is the way it is, so this isn't the way it is. It's true or false. And the dualities go on, and it's always neither. It's always question mark. It's always unknown, unknowable. It's always the, let's say, totality in which the conclusion, the idea, the description appears. It's never one point of view. It's either no points of view or all points of view. So when I'm saying this, I'm using the same rules of language, rules of description, in kind of dualistic terms to describe attempt to describe something or point to something that obscures non-dual, that obscures awakeness, or obscures realization, or whatever you'd like to call it. And it's that thing pointing to itself, that dualistic construct pointing to itself, so that what notices that is then, let's say, known to be not that, not not what appears in that, not what is described in that, and that can't be talked about. And it becomes a lot more less about the language used, less about the constructs, the ideas, the words, the conclusions, the statements about the way it is, and more about the energy behind it. And the energy is identification. At least that's what we're looking for. We're looking for what it feels like that compels the conclusion, that compels the need for the conclusion, the need for the final statement about the way it is, the need to resist some part of anything about experience or reality. They need to believe something is a way. They need to believe anything, really. What is it that's behind that? What is that motivated by? It doesn't matter about the content, the words, the semantics, the concepts, the details, the specifics. What matters is that energy, because it is an energetic apparition, let's say. The energy of identification, of buy-in with belief to something that contains a me that relates to something about reality, something about awakening, something about a concept. And this is where it's very confusing, because from that ID, from that identified position in thought, let's say, seeming position, it looks like what I'm doing right now and in all these videos is the same thing. That's the only way it can look, from that position of identification. The only way the only thing it can do is relate in its own way to what it sees, and it sees a person talking about the way something is or isn't. But that's not what I'm talking about. Not really. And so nothing I can say is true. Nothing I say really makes sense. Nothing I say is or isn't a certain way. Ultimately with this message, it's about none of that. It's about none of that. None of it matters. What matters is something I can't explain, but I can describe and point to an experience, in your experience, what seems to be obstructing it. What I point to, what seems to be obstructing it, because I can't point to it. I can't say the way it is, because it isn't a way. There's no way, and always it's not a way. There's no way it is. There's no conclusion. There's no finality. There's no authority. Nothing like that. Which is why it's so hard to point to it, because it's fluid. It's everything. It's invisible to the mind. Invisible. Because it is the mind. And again, this is a kind of common trend that I notice, and I'm very familiar with this myself, because that's me. The analytical agenda is very much a male thing predominantly, or at least a male energy. It's common in men, especially young men, that they need to conclude, they need to state to themselves with belief, I know this is the way it is, this is the way it is, and this is the way it's not. That's a belief, and the belief requires identification with that belief. It requires the assumed entity that is me that identifies with that belief to give it reality. From what I'm pointing to, there's nothing that can be said that is or isn't a certain way, that's real. That's why it's not possible for me anymore to argue with or debate another seeming person about the way it is or isn't, about anything. It's just not like that anymore. It's not possible anymore. It doesn't work like that. It doesn't. The belief there. I mean, it's possible to, in the semantics and the specifics, have a debate about something, but it's not real, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't refer to anything real. It doesn't. in a sense, it's useless. It's not the point, because it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter, because any idea that can be discussed or debated about, in the sense of, you know, so usually like a debate or discussion in that sense would be like a back and forth between two parties or more to build a more accurate picture of the way something is. So that's the function of the debate. Um, um, in this that I'm pointing to, that doesn't work at all. It doesn't work at all. So it's not in that world. It's not in that, on that level. It's not affected by that at all. The only thing that affects is the ever-changing and finite illusory position of the individual that relates to it. And what I'm pointing to is before all that, or transcends all that, or includes all of it. It's not part of it. It's not within it. It's not subject to it. That's just all a story that's imagined and made up based on a very finite seeming position of relation. And that position of relation is the self, the identification, the me. That almost, there was a comment recently, someone said something like, never going to be able to remember this, it's something like something to do with belief and doubt. It's something like all the self does is believe and doubt, and that was very accurate. But belief and doubt are kind of, they're the same energy. They're the same thing, you could say. They're the same function. You kind of can't have belief without doubt. The feeling of it is the same, or at least it's two sides of the same coin. But this analytical agenda is something that the me attaches itself to, especially after like a glimpse, or even I would say like a glimpse, an experience. It reframes this moment of clarity into an experience that it can relate to, that it can hold, that it can say, this is the way it is now, I've seen it. But it's not a way. There's no way it is. And it's kind of like a defense mechanism. Like the me, the self, almost senses its own absence, and it doesn't understand it, so it grabs onto something. It reconfigures itself into a context that is comfortable enough to say, I am stable, I have a belief, I am me, and this is how I relate to this. And then it'll cling to that. And with awakening and stuff, it'll cling to that ferociously because of the weight in that, because it sensed its own disappearance, it sensed its own absence, which from that point of view is death. So, I went through all this with the doubt thing. So the me, the mind, would tell myself, you didn't have an awakening. You're not awake. You're making this up. You're a fraud. You are deluded. You're deluding yourself. You're now subscribed to this mass delusion where there are people, seeming to talk about this, seeming to teach this, and they're talking shit, and they're making it up. You're making it up, and you're colluding with it, all this kind of stuff. after a clear recognition that there isn't the belief that makes that seem like it's worth buying in. It's not a choice, but makes that seem like it has any weight, that it has any inherent reality, that there is there is believable. It's not believable, but before the recognition clarified, it was believable, and that was the obstruction. That was the thing, that because I was trying to hold on to something, I was trying to hold on to life essentially as I understood it from the point of view of the me, and that looked like an analytical agenda. And you're like, it says collect as much information on this as you can, conclude as much as you can, bullet point it, 1, 2, 3, this is the way it is, this is the way it's not, conclusion, done. Okay, that's the way it is, now I know that, now I'm safe. Like, fuck all this spiritual shit, don't look there. Whatever you glimpse there, this is what it is, look at this, here it's here it's here, that's what it looks like, that's what it is, take this, don't look there, that's what it does, don't look, it's too scary. It's too uncertain, there's nothing in there for you, there's no conclusion for you to bite into, no belief for you to hold and communicate to other people. But awakeness was awakeness, and awakeness recognised itself. And then whatever this illusory thing is comes in and takes that and says, that's mine, look at this, ignore that. It's so weird because it's when this recognition clarifies, right, when this awakening comes about, let's say, it's kind of like, and I was like this as well, and I hear a lot of people say the same thing. They're like, wait a minute, is that it? Is that what these spiritual figures are talking about? Is that what this teaching is about? Is that it? Really? This? I knew this. This is kind of obvious. Is it really that simple? Is that really what they're talking about? It can't be. It can't be. But then it's there, and you it's recognised itself at some level, but the mind's still going, it can't be that. That's too normal. That's too boring. It's not what I thought. It's not this fantastic, big, explosive bliss experience of something changing about my experience, that something changing about the way I'm relating to my experience. It's just not like that. It's so obvious. It's so normal. It's so just here. It's not an attainment. It was just here. And I said this, and I've heard a lot of people say this in my earlier video. I was like, is this it? Is this it? Is this what the spiritual traditions were talking about? Is that all it is? It can't be. It can't be that. It's not a thing, but it's here. It's you. You're looking from it. It's too obvious. And you can see that you've just been looking past it and ignoring it this whole time. With this spiritual agenda, with this analytical agenda, you've been taking a step past it and looking for something else. Whereas you're looking from it. It is you. It is obvious. It's not obvious when you're following that analytical thing. It's complicated, it's unsure, it has belief, uncertainty and doubt. This has no doubt. Doubt comes after. The mind adds doubt to it after, to try and pull you more into the ID narrative about the way things are, to stop you falling back onto just this, just what's here anyway. And then when that recognises itself, when awakeness recognises itself, and you then know it consciously, attention comes to it. Attention can rest as it and in it. You can look from it at experience, and you're like, yes, that is it. That is it. This is real. This isn't bullshit. This is real. They weren't lying. They weren't making it up. It's not a mass delusion. and it's just obvious because it confirms itself. The experience confirms itself. It is. That's it. This is. That's it. Simple as that. There's no conclusion in it. There's an ongoingness. There's a verbingness. There's a lack of objectivity. There's a lack of apparentness in an objective sense. And then when attention comes to that, when you can really put the attention in that, let's say, do you notice that this simple, obvious thing you've been looking past the whole time has depth that's unbelievably infinite? That you couldn't believe how deep this goes. You couldn't believe how mysterious, bizarre, insane, trippy, nuanced this that you've been looking past is. And then it starts to get a bit scary. It starts to get a bit weird. It starts to get a bit too familiar, too immediate, too infinite. And then if that's seen as a glimpse, like for example, psychedelics will do that to people. It will show you this. A big part of what psychedelics do is just bring your attention into the senses, and then you see what's, apart from all the weird stuff, distortions, you see what this is briefly. You see as this, you dial into presence, but you see the infiniteness of it, the immediacy of it, and that's frightening. From that, it's disturbing from the point of view of the person. So that's why it comes up with all these conclusions, all this framework and all this belief, because it can hold on to that and keep itself afloat, keep the illusion going, the illusion that you are in control, that you can explain things, that you can explain things to yourself and it makes sense. And none of this makes sense. That's what's free about it. It doesn't have to make sense. And none of it's knowable. That's what's free about it. It's already knowing. It is the knowingness. It doesn't need to know itself, or it does know itself inherently. It's wild. It's wild scary when you actually just look at something, hear something, really look at something, really walk down the street with attention, let's say, fully in the senses. That's frightening. It can be for a while. It isn't after a while. But that's the function. That's why it bounces up into the mind. The mind tries to explain itself, to rationalise, to categorise, and that's this analytical agenda. It's trying to analyse this, it's trying to make sense of it, when it's not possible. It was only impossible from an illusory point of view. And that's what goes. That's what's seen as that. And when it's seen as that, then it's no longer a convincing distraction. It no longer pulls you away from this. And what this isn't explainable, and the depth is infinite. Like, really infinite. Infinite not in the way that the mind can predict or assume or project, and that is scary. So that's why that's why when I notice, and it's very obvious when there's a identification in this with this analytical agenda, when I notice that, it's clear that is what I just explained. That's a defense mechanism, and you don't really want to shut that down. Not that it's even possible for that to happen in a causal way, but you don't really want to mess with that too much, because it can be really, it's there for a reason, and things play out the way they do. So That's why I'm not inclined to resist people's perspective on things, because their perspective is what it needs to be, and it's happening the way it's happening. That's perfect. It's fine. It's always perfect. If you take that away quickly, like for example psychedelics, or types of meditation, or pointing, non-dual pointing, can do this. It can get really scary pretty quickly. It can get kind of a bit much. It seems to, from a position, it seems to be a bit much. Really, it's perfect. It's just what it is. But from that illusory point of view of identification, it can really be a bit jarring. It can be a bit. It can trigger a more exaggerated version of that narrative clinging, because you're coming in touch with something that is more powerful, more infinite, let's say a higher power from the point of view of the person, which is yourself really. But you're coming into contact with that, and you're also coming into contact with the emotions and the physical sensory experience that the mind narrative has been distracting from for a reason, because it's maybe it's not ready to be seen yet. Maybe these layers have to come off bit by bit, and it can be gradual. Maybe it's more comfortable that way. Maybe that's just the way it needs to go, or maybe it just all falls off at once, and then yeah. Let's see what we're doing for time. But openness, question mark, not knowing, not needing to confirm because it's ongoing, not needing to clarify because the clarity is inherently here in this already, not needing to attain something, not needing to chase expectations, not needing to capture, confirm and conclude, and categorize and label with belief. And getting in touch with the energy that pulls that narrative into reality, that it catches you in this, the way things are, thinking about, figuring out, this is how it is, this is how it isn't, this is how it needs to be, that energy behind that, and the energy of letting go, of release, of dilation, that you could probably say is like the opposite to that for a while, I think is important. Because things aren't a certain way. I can tell you that things are a certain way. I can talk about my own experience relatively. But everything I say is just a story. It's just a story. It's just a model. It's a representation of something. Anyway, that'll do, and I'll talk to you next time.